Okay. I think we can get started. Welcome everyone to this event titled Adventures of a Weekend Waste Warrior. This is a part of Bellevue College's Earth Week events where we are exploring topics around the theme The Future is Now, which strives for a just and sustainable future for all. You can see our full schedule of events by visiting the link in the chat box. We do have a couple more this afternoon that we highly recommend you check out. My name is Amber Nicholson and I'm from the Bellevue College Office of Sustainability. I will be moderating this event. Before we get started, we have a couple of things to go over. First of all, you are muted upon joining, and we would like for you to stay on mute unless you are actively responding to a prompt from the speaker or asking a question. If you would like to keep your camera on, it does make for a more engaging session for everyone and helps us to build community. This event is also being recorded to post on our Office of Sustainability webpage. Throughout the session, please treat everyone with respect and share your comments and questions in the chat box. We will open up for Q&A at the end where you can either unmute yourself or have us read out your question. For the best Zoom experience, I recommend that you click the speaker view button in the top right corner of your screen, which will make sure that the speaker is centered for you. Lastly, we pause to acknowledge that Bellevue College resides on the traditional and occupied land of the Coast Salish peoples, past, present, and future. That includes, but is not limited to, Snoqualmie, Suquamish, Duwamish, Nisqually, Tulalip, and Muckleshoot. We honor their connection to the region, pay respect to Coast Salish elders past and present, and stand in solidarity through their struggles with continued systemic oppression. We commit to care for the land and water and center equity at the core of our unlearning. Now let me take a quick moment to introduce our speaker. Oh no, where'd my speaker thing go? Apparently I've lost Theo's bows, so I will just turn it over to Theo to introduce himself. Welcome, Theo.
Hi, everybody. My name's Theo. I'm a Sustainability Outreach Coordinator for the Office of Sustainability at Bellevue College, and I'm going to be speaking to you today about waste and my own waste audit journey and then some innovations in waste. So let's get started. I'm going to share my screen. All right. Can you see my presentation?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay. So the title of this presentation is Adventures of a Weekend Waste Warrior, because over the weekend, I tackled my waste. Not this weekend, a while ago. Anyways, so the agenda for today is I'm going to speak for about 10 minutes about the global waste situation. Then I'm going to go into how to conduct a waste audit and the results of my own personal waste audit. And then I'm going to speak about some innovations in a circular economy for waste. And at the end, we'll have some time for questions and for you to present any waste items you might have that you have questions about. Okay, so let's start with the global waste situation. Waste is everywhere. The world generates about 2 billion tons of municipal solid waste per year, and at least 33% of that is not managed in an environmentally safe manner. So what does that mean? Well, if we look at plastic waste, for example, only 9% of all plastic waste has ever been recycled, that's been produced. 12% has been incinerated, and about 80% has accumulated in landfills, dumps, or the natural environment. So the way that it builds up in the natural environment is that waste is carried by major cities' rivers into the ocean every year, about 8 million tons of plastic every year. And with that said, it's estimated there will be more plastic than fish by weight in the world's oceans by 2050 if this trend continues. So that's a lot of plastic. This plastic also ends up in our bodies through the fish we eat and our water, as that plastic is broken down into microplastic debris that finds its way into our food and water supply and ultimately into our bodies. In addition to the physical space that waste occupies, it also creates emissions that lead to global warming. So 1.6 billion tons of carbon dioxide equivalent is generated from solid waste management. And that's just in 2016. And that's about 5% of global emissions. The range of emissions from waste ranges from about 5 to 10%. So this is a conservative estimate. Waste-related emissions are also anticipated to increase significantly as the population grows and we continue to produce more and more waste. So where do those emissions come from? They come from landfill gas, which is half methane and half carbon dioxide. Now, we all know carbon dioxide is a common greenhouse gas. Methane is even more potent than carbon dioxide when it comes to its ability to trap heat in the atmosphere. And so that's an even bigger problem. So as our waste sits in landfills, it undergoes anaerobic conditions without air. And in those conditions, it starts to decompose and produce methane. And that methane is extremely effective at trapping heat in the atmosphere, which is what we do not want. That's all leading to global warming, climate change. And the problem is growing, like I mentioned before. As the population grows, there's more people, there's more waste. And by 2050, it's expected to grow to 3.4 billion tons per year, where it's at 2 billion tons now. So if we look at waste generation by income level, we can see who's producing the most waste. High income countries, although we only account for 16% of the world's population, we generate over 1/3 of the world's waste. Whereas low income countries, which account for 9% of the world population, generate only 5% of the world's global waste. You can see there's a huge discrepancy in terms of waste generation by income level. Now, if we look at the composition of waste in the world, we'll see that most of it is food and green waste that can be composted. About 40% is dry recyclables, and the rest is a mix of various other items. So how is this waste treated and disposed of? Well, 40% of it is disposed in landfills, 19% goes through recycling, 11% is incinerated, and only 5.5% is composted, and 33% is still openly dumped. So as I was saying before, 40% of our waste is compostable, yet we only compost 5% of it. So there's a huge gap in terms of how we're dealing with it. For open dumping and burning waste, this is especially problematic in developing countries where about 93% of waste is burned or dumped in roads or waterways. And that's how a lot of that plastic ends up in the ocean. So if we look specifically at North America, the 3 countries, Bermuda, Canada, and the United States, produce the highest average amount of waste per capita at 2.21 kilograms per day. Now, most of that ends up in a landfill. About 1/3 is recycled, 12% is incinerated, and less than 1% is compost. Now, again, when we look at the global waste, right, 40% of our waste is compostable, yet we're only composting 1% in North America. So there's a huge gap. So now I'm going to go into my own personal waste journey and how to conduct a waste audit. So what is a waste audit and why should you do it? A waste audit is a breakdown of all of your waste. It's a snapshot of your waste at a given time. And what this allows you to do is identify areas of improvement. You can find, oh, maybe there's something that I've been throwing in the trash that I can now put in recycling or compost. It's a way to get better educated and to reduce your waste overall and have a more positive environmental impact. So the first step in conducting a waste audit is to familiarize yourself with your local waste guidelines. So I live in Redmond, Washington, so I got the local waste and recycling guidelines for waste management, which is the operator, the service provider that takes care of our waste in Redmond and also in Bellevue and quite a few other areas. And I tried to find out about some of the things that I might be throwing in the trash now that may be recyclable, or just figuring out where things go. There's also this app that I used, Waste Management Cartwise, where you can type in any item you have nearly, and it'll tell you exactly where you can put it. So a few of the questions that I asked myself when I got into this process are listed here, and I'm going to go through each of these and address them. So first, does your service provider take food scraps in an organics bin, including meat, cheese, and bones? In my case, yes, they do. So that goes into the compost and then gets processed by Cedar Grove that breaks down that waste into compost. Do you have single stream recycling? So I have single stream recycling, which basically means I can throw glass, plastic, paper, metal all in the same bin, and it goes to a sorting facility where that's all separated out and diverted to different streams. But in some places you have to separate glass from plastic, from paper, from metal, right from where your home is. There's not, you know, you don't get this convenience of having single stream recycling. Should recyclables be collected in a plastic bag? So my sister lives in the BC dorm, and she initially was recycling she was bagging her recyclables in a plastic bag and throwing in the recycling like that. And that's a huge issue because those plastic bags get caught in the sorting machines at the recycling plant and gunk it up and, you know, stop the operations for a period of time. So please do not bag your recyclables. They should be clean, empty, and loose. Does your service provider offer a free home composting bin? So for Waste Management Redmond, they do. So if you don't have a compost bin currently, you can request one by calling this number, and you'll be able to get a free home compost bin for your kitchen. What items are considered non-recyclable? So if we look at this list, there's a whole list of things that are non-recyclable. One of the things that I was surprised about was actually pet waste. So we have a cat, and I regularly have to clean out the litter box. And I thought, I wasn't putting it in the compost, but I thought there's a potential that it may be compostable. But it turns out Waste Management Redmond does not compost pet waste, unfortunately. What about plastic shopping bags? So we get a lot of these, they just build up in our homes, and then we can't throw them in the recycling bin, like I mentioned before, because of what it does to the machines. But there are places where you can recycle them. So if you go to plasticfilmrecycling.org/drop-off, you'll be able to find locations around you where you can drop off plastic film. And it includes produce bags, bread bags, case wrap, lots of plastic film, different variations on those. And typically your local supermarket will take those. I know a local Safeway of mine does that, as well as Fred Meyer. What about fluorescent light bulbs? So if you want to recycle light bulbs, go to lightrecycle.org. You can also go to Home Depot, and they have bins right at the entranceway that you can recycle your fluorescent light bulbs, or batteries plus bulbs, which is another, which is a light bulb store. For batteries, you can go to Call to Recycle. For alkaline batteries, there's specific locations you can recycle those, but you may have to pay to recycle them. Typically, we're told to throw those in the trash, but if we can, I'd recommend trying to find a way to recycle them. Prescription bottles can be recycled at local pharmacies, and if you want to find one of those pharmacies where they do take pill bottles and any remaining medications that are in there to safely dispose of them, go to kingcountysecuremedicinereturn.org. And I'll make sure that everyone gets these links at the end. So like I mentioned with pet waste, according to Waste Management Redmond, pet waste unfortunately goes in the garbage. So, but I'll come back to this later on when I talk about innovations. This is something that I wasn't aware of. I thought that any piece of metal can go in the recycling, but because there are people sorting this at the end of the day, we have to be aware of their working conditions. And so sharp metal can be dangerous when people are sorting that. And so unless you can, if you can put the lid, the sharp lid of whatever can you just opened and crimp the can shut with the lid inside, then you can throw it in the recycling. If not, it needs to go in the trash. So that was new information for me when I was doing that research. And for anything else in King County that you have questions about, you can go to this link and type in a material, and it'll tell you where you can get rid of it. So after going through all that information, I sorted my waste. I took my waste from a week, and I have a trash can, we have a recycling area, and a compost bin. And I did an initial volume analysis of what I had. So I had 26 gallons of trash, 2 13-gallon bags, 35 gallons of recycling, and 1 gallon of compost. So that's what the initial breakdown looks like. Most of my waste was recyclable. After that, it was going to the landfill, and then the smallest category was compost at 1.6%. So the first step is to break down your waste into categories. So I broke down my waste into 4 different categories under recyclable items: paper and cardboard, aluminum cans and metal, glass, and recyclable plastic. Non-recyclable items, we had multi-layer packaging. So like those chip bags are made of plastic and metal and are difficult to recycle, and so they go in the trash. Single-use plastic packaging, like plastic film, styrofoam, sharp metal, and other assorted items. And then lastly, the last category was compost, which is anything biodegradable essentially, or food, soil, and paper, food that you haven't eaten, things like that. So I sorted them and I took pictures of each so you can see them here. And you'll notice there's either an R or an NR next to the category, and that indicates whether it is R recyclable or N non-recyclable. Then we got the compost. So after sorting these items, I tallied them up individually. So I counted, how many pieces of cardboard and paper I had, how many aluminum cans I had, how many floss picks, cigarette butts, Q-tips, okay? I really went on a deep dive here. I wore gloves, so don't get too concerned. So I tallied it all up, and then, of course, I put it in a graph. And we can see in this graph what my big ticket items were. So I had a couple friends over the week that I did this, and we had, we had some canned aluminum canned items, seltzer, of course, non-alcoholic. And that was the largest ticket item in terms of recyclable items. And then when it came to non-recyclables, the biggest offender was plastic and multi-layer packaging. So those plastic chip bags and single-use plastic items. So before I sorted my waste, remember I had 35 gallons of recycling, 26 of trash, and 1 gallon of compost. After I sorted those items, I was able to divert some of what was in the trash to recycling and compost. And so we had some changes. So recycling went up by 14.3%, up to 40 gallons. The trash I cut in half, so it went down to 13 gallons. And my compost had the biggest increase, 900%, went from 1 to 9 gallons. So here's a little pie chart to see that breakdown. The initial waste breakdown is on the left, and then after my audit, after I sorted it, you can see that the recycling grew, trash shrunk, and compost grew as well. So where was the shift? So there were some glass and plastic bottles and cardboard that were in my trash that ended up going to the recycling. I blame that on my roommate who's from Texas and is not used to recycling. We've had to educate him quite a bit. He, is very used to the convenience of just throwing everything in the trash, but I've tried to, guide him. But I found a couple items that he didn't recycle, so I put those in the recycling. And then a huge portion of the trash was used tissues. And so those I diverted into the compost, but I'll come back to those later. So what to do with used tissues? I thought they were initially compostable, but after I did some more research, there's an issue with the tissues. According to Waste Management Redmond, used tissues should be thrown in the trash if they are contaminated with bodily fluids like your snot. But I put them in the compost, unfortunately. And after I found that, it was too late after I found this out, but going forward, you should put your snot-filled tissues in the trash. Obviously, put everything in the correct bin. That was the last step. So a couple of questions, poll questions I'm going to ask right now, just to get a gauge of where we're at. Which items do you think make up the largest portion of your waste? And then would you dig through your trash like I did? So you can just put in the chat which items you think constitute the largest portion of your waste, and then also a yes or no to whether or not you would dig through your trash. And if you won't, that's fine. It's just want to get a gauge of who would put on the gloves and do the dirty work. I can't see the chat right now for some reason. What happened?
Do you need me to read it for you?
No, I got it. Takeout food containers. Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense because, you know, we're all ordering from, you know, takeout right, these days with COVID. Snack wrappers like fruit leather. Okay. Nice. Anything else? Mailings. Okay, yeah. A lot of recyclable paper from mail. Amazon boxes. Yes. Snack wrappers and plastic packaging. So we can see that a lot of it is packaging. Food scraps or food craps. I think the person who put food craps meant food scraps. What do you mean non-recyclable items? So by non-recyclable items, well, I'm talking about waste in general, but non-recyclable items refers to anything that you can't put in the recycling, of course. All right, I think that's good for now. I'm gonna keep going, but I appreciate you guys all participating and putting that in the chat. Okay. So now I'm going to speak a little bit about some innovations in waste and how those innovations can address some of the issues that I had with my waste. So there's two types of innovation. There's upstream innovation and downstream innovation. Upstream innovation rethinks the product at the design phase, whereas downstream innovation looks at how we process a product after the consumer uses it. So I'm going to start with downstream innovation. So one of the things I mentioned earlier was that pet waste is goes in the trash in Redmond for me. But there are places where pet waste can go in the compost, and the reason for that is the compost pile is a hot composting process. So they raise the temperature of the compost to about 55 degrees Celsius and keep it there for 3 days straight so that it kills off any pathogens like E. coli or salmonella that you might find in pet waste or uncooked meats or anything like that. So this is something that I thought might be a great innovation to bring into King County to address you know, pet waste, because you know, many of us have pets and we have to deal with that waste, and if there was a way to compost it, that would be a huge way to divert that waste from the landfill. And this is an example from Calgary. So I know Amber's from Canada, so this is a win for Canada. That also includes facial tissue and toilet paper. So all that could go into the compost potentially, and instead of going into a landfill. So that's a huge win. Another example of an innovation in organic waste is Tagro, which is a Tacoma-based product sold as fertilizer. It's a fertilizer, basically, that's made from sewage sludge. So it takes the biosolids from your waste in the toilet and goes through a composting process. It's also, they mix in some other ingredients in addition to the biosolids from your toilet, and they sell that as potting soil. And I've heard great things about it. People love it, and it seems to boost plant growth exponentially. Another local example of this is Loop, for you poop, which is a product in King County, which is more local. You could get this in Bellevue. It's a natural soil builder, endlessly renewable resource, returns carbon and nutrients to the land. Simply put, it is good stuff that builds good soil. So that's Loop for your poop. And then we've got anaerobic digestion, also another way to deal with organic waste. So the other two examples we spoke about were composting, right? Anaerobic digestion takes organic waste, puts it in an anaerobic environment, which is without oxygen, and allows the microorganisms that exist in that waste to break it down in that environment and produce methane. Now, earlier I mentioned that methane is a powerful greenhouse gas, but if we capture it, we can divert it and use it to produce energy. It still produces CO2 emissions when we burn it, so there's still a greenhouse gas effect there. But instead of going straight into the atmosphere, by converting it from methane to CO2 through combustion, we're reducing its global warming potential and also getting some energy along the way, which is useful. Another way we can capture methane is through, if we have to throw things in a landfill, we can still capture that landfill gas and siphon off that methane and use it for fuel, as I mentioned earlier. Another cool way to deal with waste is plasma gasification. So what this does is it takes all your waste, whether it's hazardous waste, radioactive, plastic, food, everything. And it takes these plasma blasters, basically, and incinerates, doesn't incinerate it, it gasifies the waste and converts it into a few different products. So you get a gas called syngas, which can be transformed into ethanol, methanol, and hydrogen gas, which can be used as a fuel. And then it traps, the remaining hazardous elements in a molten glass that can be broken down and used as a construction component. So this is extremely energy intensive though. So there is a downside. So if the energy used to feed this process is coming from fossil fuels, then it kind of is defeating the purpose. So we want to make sure that the energy that goes into this is coming from renewable sources. And another really cool example, and I'm going to play a video here real quick, is UBQ materials. So I'm just going to play this video and let me know if you can hear it.
Waste is one of the single biggest challenges to civilization. 2 billion tons of waste are produced globally each year. 80% of this waste is dumped in open landfills, polluting our rivers, our lakes, and our oceans. And only 4% out of it will be recycled. The problem is even bigger, as landfills generate 8% of our world total carbon emissions. As population grows and economic conditions improve, the problem grows exponentially. At UBQ, we developed a revolutionary solution to the waste epidemic. We have redefined waste disposal, eliminated waste-related pollution, and unlocked the immense value inside waste. So what is the UBQ solution? What we can tell you is the base of our patents. We take all your household garbage, the organic parts like food residues, garden trimmings, and dirty carton, the unsorted packages and mixed plastics, and instead of dumping it to the landfill, we convert it into a new material. During the UBQ conversion process, the heterogeneous stream of materials is reduced to its more basic natural components that reconstitute and bind together into a new composite sustainable material, the UBQ material. All this through a clean, energy-efficient, and commercially viable process. What is UBQ material, you ask? It's a new bio-based, climate-positive, worldwide patented material that can be used in existing industries for the manufacturing of thousands of products. It is clean, sustainable, and cost-effective. And it is also recyclable, the greenest thermoplastic material on the planet. We provide the missing link between waste disposal through to new product manufacturing, transitioning from a linear extraction and consumption model that exhausts our natural resources to a truly circular economy. Brilliant minds are behind this breakthrough development, and we are proud of our team. UBQ Inside products are a real and available solution. Using it simply makes sense. For us, for the planet, and our future generations. UBQ, everything matters.
All right, so look past the marketing a little bit, but the point here is that we're able to take municipal solid waste, mixed waste, whether it's food residue, plastics, and everything in between, and they take that, and through a patented process that they're not able to talk about too much, they break it down into its components and transform it into a thermoplastic, which is pretty awesome in my mind. That's taking all your waste that would normally go into a landfill and converting it into a building material or an input for another product or something. So this is a really cool innovation in my mind, and I thought it was worth highlighting. All right. Oops.
Waste is what?
Okay. So a quick poll question. Would you eat food grown with loop for your poop? So just a yes or no in the chat. This is something that you would put in your home garden potentially. And remember that all the pathogens are killed off. It's safe to use. And it's just, I think more that mental barrier is a bit difficult to overcome. So you guys could throw in the chat your yeses and nos. Let's see, what do we got? We got a resounding yes, so long as the human manure is properly treated. Okay, that's awesome. That's really good to hear. All right, thank you for your feedback. Now I'm going to speak about some upstream innovations. So like I mentioned before, there's two types of innovation. We have upstream innovation and downstream innovation. We had just spoken about downstream innovation, which was dealing with products after they've been used. Upstream innovation is going to address how we can redesign and rethink products from the onset to reduce waste down the line. So one way, the simplest way to do that is to simply remove unnecessary packaging. So for example, cards, greeting cards, normally come in a plastic sheath that goes around the card. So simply removing that plastic sheath is a way to reduce the plastic film waste that would accumulate from that product. Another example is cans that come with, multi-buy cans that come with a plastic film on top to hold it all together. So simply removing that is a way to reduce waste. So this is low-hanging fruit, obviously. Another way is to rethink the product to eliminate packaging altogether. So Lush shampoo bars remove the need to buy a bottle for your shampoo. And these shampoo bars will last as long as 3 medium-sized shampoo bottles. So they're very efficient. And they look pretty cool too. And they come in all sorts of different flavors. Not that you should eat that, don't eat it. Okay. Another example is switching to colorless plastic. So everyone knows or is familiar with a green Sprite bottle, right? By simply switching the color of the plastic to clear, it is far more valuable in terms of its ability to be recycled. So that simple switch is a way to drastically increase recycling rates. Another cool product that I came across is Uhu, which is a flexible packaging for beverages and sauces. So you can see here ketchup packets. The material that surrounds the ketchup is called Notpla, which is just a trademark name they came up with. It's made out of seaweed and plants, and it's biodegradable in 4 to 6 weeks. And this could be a great way for fast food chains to, allow you to still have the convenience of a single-use packet without needing to deal with the issues of, all that ending up in a landfill after you use it for 10 seconds. Another cool innovation is Appeal, which is a plant-based, colorless, odorless, edible powder that is sprayed on produce to extend its shelf life. It's made from the same components that an avocado peel or a banana peel or an orange peel or an apple peel are made out of. It's that structure that gives those fruits and vegetables their protective outer layer was broken down and turned into a spray that is then sprayed on the produce, like acting like a second peel, a second skin, basically. It's entirely natural, biodegradable, edible, and it helps make that produce last twice as long. So a huge amount of our waste is compostable, right? It's food waste, and a large portion of that is coming from waste that goes bad in a or food that goes bad in a supermarket, for example, or even in your house. So being able to extend the shelf life of produce is a huge way to reduce that waste. Another cool innovation is Loop, this time for your products, which is a waste-free delivery system that partners with various different companies to provide you with products with reusable packaging. So, for example, getting your ice cream in a metal tin as opposed to a one of those paper cardboard things. And Loop takes these reusable packaging and you put it in your little Loop tote bag, and it gets picked up once a week. All of those items get cleaned and reused later on for the same product. And then you have a weekly subscription that you order a certain number of products from. So here are some of the brand partners that Loop works with. So you can think, for example, Crest. A lot of these, a lot of them here are, toothpaste. That's the word I was thinking of. Toothpaste companies. But we also have cleaning products, Febreze, ice cream. Food for your cats. There's 7th Generation, which is it's like Tide, laundry detergent. So there's a lot of examples of staple items that you use constantly that you could get in a reusable packaging through a subscription system that would just eliminate that waste completely from your day-to-day. All right, so I'm gonna ask a couple of poll questions now. Would you eat a peel produce, which is that produce that's sprayed with basically the same constituents of what makes an orange peel or banana peel? Would you sign up for Loop for your products? And would you wash your hair with a Lush shampoo bar? So you can go just, yes, yes, no, or no, yes, yes. We'll just do, 3 answers there. I have all the links included, so I'll make sure you guys get access to that. I saw somebody asked about those. Cool, so, it looks like somebody makes their own shampoo bars. That's awesome. All right, great. Okay, so now I'm gonna open it up and let you guys ask any questions you might have about any of the things I talked about today. And if you have any items that you'd like to present that I can maybe help direct you as to where you can address that and try and divert that from a landfill. Amber, would you mind?
Yes, we've got a couple.
With that?
Yeah, we got a couple questions in the chat, but if anybody would like to unmute, now is a good time to unmute and ask your question before we go to the chat. Okay, I guess we're starting with the chat.
All right.
Okay, let me just scroll back up because we had quite a few questions near the beginning. First question we have is, what do you do with chemical liquids? Before throwing them out, would they need to be neutralized? So for hazardous waste items, there's in Factoria a depot where you can take those items. And if for any of those items that you have questions about, there's that link I mentioned earlier that goes back to King County, and it will tell you where anything goes. But for hazardous waste items,
I don't believe you need to neutralize them in advance. Once you take them to the hazardous waste facility, they will address those items as they come in.
Yeah, and there should be other household hazardous waste facilities to take it to across the county, not just Victoria. So definitely check out the King County website for those locations.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, next question is, what can you do with leftover cooking oil, say from frying? Is there a local program you can bring it to?
That is a good question. So for that oil, you can save it and potentially reuse it. I believe some restaurants, no, sorry. I believe it's also compostable. It is compostable. So you can potentially put that in your compost. Amber, do you have anything else to add there?
I think we would need to look into whether that's accepted by our composting facilities in King County. However, I did take a quick look. I found a company online that does deal in oil recycling for fryer oil, and you may be able to reach out to them to see if they'll accept household fryer oil.
Cool.
Next question is, where is plasma gasification being used currently?
So there's actually a company based out of Washington that's doing it. It's called Inintech. And right now they're doing it on a pretty small scale, but like I mentioned, that process is quite energy intensive, so it's not necessarily as economically viable as other options for dealing with waste. But I'll link in the chat Inintech, which is right here. Let me just drop this in the chat. So yeah, that's a local example of plasma gasification. Oh.
Theo, you're still doing screen share also, just for your reference.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, the next question is, what is the emission output from the manufacturing process from UBQ, and how does it stack up against landfill emissions?
Got it, that's a good question. So that I do not know. You'd have to reach out to UBQ and find that out. But there is definitely an energy process. There's definitely energy that goes into that process, and there could potentially be emissions associated with how they melt down everything and convert it into a thermoplastic. So that's a really good question. Yeah.
Would anybody like to unmute and ask a question before I keep going through the chat?
I had a quick question. I run into this occasionally where I'll have a really good aluminum water bottle, and then I'll lose the cap or something. Those aluminum water bottles, some of them have lining, some of them don't. So do you think that those could still go into the regular recycling, or do you have to throw them away?
So when you're talking about the lining, you mean the rubber seal on the top?
So some of them have a rubber seal, but I don't I just got a new one because my other one got lost. And so it says that it's good for hot and cold water. So I'm assuming that there's a lining in it. So even if it's metal, I don't know what might be that inner lining. So I wonder, is this something that, do these things need to get thrown away even though they look like metal, or is it something that can still go into recycling?
Yeah, that's a good question. So for multi-layer packaging, for example, which is thin layers of metal and plastic, those items are not recyclable. But for a metal water bottle, I'd assume that is recyclable. But if it had a plastic lining on the inside or the outside, that would be considered multi-layer, in which case it'd be pretty difficult to recycle. I
think you should consider looking at what brand you have and seeing if that brand is using multiple layers or if it's just metal. Because if it is just metal, it is obviously recyclable.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, another question in the chat is, you always hear about things that we put in our recycling are not recycled. Is it correct in our area? What are the numbers and what can we do to improve items being recycled?
Yeah, so What happens to our recyclables is that they get sorted and then, you know, put into huge, homogeneous,
Bale.
like
Bale is the
huge
word you're looking for.
bales. Yeah, thank you. Bales, and then those bales, if the items are clean enough, then they might be accepted by a lot of that gets sent overseas to Southeast Asia. Malaysia is a huge importer of recyclable plastic waste. A lot of it used to go to China for us, but then China stopped accepting certain items and basically put a ban out a couple of years ago. So more and more, we're having to deal with it domestically. But we don't necessarily have the capacity to deal with all that waste, so most of it gets sent overseas.
There are some recycling facilities that we have within Washington. So there are some places that do the recycling. It's not all sent overseas. For example, we did take a field trip with students to Cascade Recycling where we saw glass and plastics being recycled. So there are some places that do it. And what you can do to improve the possibility of those products getting recycled is to make sure that they are clean when you put them in the recycling. It's definitely the contamination that's causing the biggest recycling issues right now. So keep it clean and you're better off.
Yep.
Are there any other questions? Feel free to unmute.
Yes, ultimately try and consume less, or buy products that have less packaging on them. So the biggest offender in my mind is just packaging. So if you're able to buy raw produce and then turn that into whatever items you want, instead of buying a bag of chips, maybe you buy a potato and slice it up and make your own, something like that.
Any other questions? I think I've got all the ones out of the chat.
All right.
Hold on, there's
So,
yeah, okay, just thank you.
Anymore?
Go for it.
Okay, so for all the things I talked about, there's links and citations for all the information I pulled. So this presentation is going to be shared with off our website, if I'm not mistaken, right? So I'll make sure that all those links are included and you'll be able to follow up on anything that you were interested in from the presentation.
Thank you so much, Theo. This has been a great presentation. Thank you to all the attendees that came today. I know that we've all learned something new that we'll take with us as we work for a more inclusive and sustainable future for all. A reminder to all attendees to check out the rest of our Earth Week activities. We do have a couple more this afternoon, including a bike ride in person, which you might be interested to get outside and get some fresh air. And a reminder that we are hiring our Student Sustainability Outreach Coordinator role. Theo, somebody's asked if you can talk about your role and what that entails.
Yeah, sure. So I am moving on from Bellevue College, and so my position will be open soon in the next week, actually. So if you're interested, I'll give you a little bit of background on what I do. So part of my role is helping to plan Earth Week events like this one. I also present to classes on various issues related to sustainability. I also help facilitate student engagement at Bellevue College in sustainability. One of the things I was helping with was to build a zero waste task force to address single-use plastic in Bellevue College's operations. Yeah, and I generally help with anything that the Office of Sustainability is doing. So there's a lot of odds and ends in terms of projects, but generally it's about student engagement and trying to connect students with the resources they need to pursue sustainability projects. So we have the SESF, which is the Student Environmental Sustainability Fund, which funds projects that anyone from the BC community might be interested in pursuing. And so my job is to help facilitate that process as well. Yeah, I think that was.
Great, thank you. So yeah, if you're interested in applying for that job as a student, please email sustainability. It's a student position, not a staff position.
Mhm.
Email sustainability@bellevuecollege.edu.
Yeah, and if
Awesome.
you're interested in the Zero Waste Task Force, please email asgsocial@bellevuecollege.edu. The person leading that is Gia Lang, and she's a student, and she's really passionate about zero waste, so we're happy to have her leading that.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time today, and I hope everyone has a good Friday and weekend.
Yeah, thank you all for coming, and